Hey, welcome to House Groups. I'm so thankful that you've chosen to be here tonight, and hopefully, over the last couple of weeks, you've had an opportunity to begin to get to know some people in your group, or maybe reconnect with some of the people in your group if you were a part of it before. We just believe in the value of connection. That life exists better when we are in circles and not in rows, when we're in relationship and community with each other. And so, I just want to say thanks for being at House Groups. This last Sunday, we kicked off a brand new series entitled Community. And over the next 4 weeks as a church, we're going to talk about what it means to be intentionally in community and in connection with each other. There's something that I believe that is a universal truth for every single person in our world today, and that is that you and I are created for connection. In fact, in the very beginning, Genesis chapter 2, God instituted this when he looked at Adam and said, man, it is not good for man to be alone. And so he creates Eve. From the very beginning, God created us in such a way that you and I are created for connection. But there's something fascinating that happens in our lives. And I believe that while we were created for connection, that we drift towards isolation. That you and I are created for connection, but we drift towards isolation. I think it is true in our relationships that we have with people, and I think it's especially true at times when it comes to our relationship with God. And so this last Sunday, we spent some time talking about something that is known as the relationship cycle. This is not something that I came up with, but something that I believe is true in our lives. And that is that when we start a relationship with somebody, that it starts at this superficial level. It's the greeter at Walmart that you fist bump. It's the cashier at Target or at Cub that you just kind of exchange pleasantries with. It's the mom or the dad that you kind of mumble something back and forth in between while you're waiting for your child to finish up their activity. Almost every single one of our relationships that we have on a daily basis start at this superficial level. And then we begin to go to the next level. We begin to ask questions and gather information. And we ask people where they're from, what it is that they do. And as we gather information, connection begins to build between us. And then we hit the key moment in every relationship: vulnerability, where we take a risk and put ourselves out there. And whenever we take a risk, whenever vulnerability enters into the equation, it goes one of two different ways. It either goes to the right, where we experience acceptance, or it goes to the left, where we experience rejection. All of us can think about times where we were vulnerable and where we experienced rejection. And there's something that takes place when we experience that. We don't like the pain, the shame, getting laughed at, marginalized, or ignored. And so oftentimes when we are rejected, we begin to shut down. And as we shut down, we think to ourselves, I don't like this emotion that I am feeling. And so we begin to build walls, thinking about the next time that we experience that and deciding we're not going to go there again. But the inherent danger becomes, if you and I refuse to be vulnerable, if we build our walls high enough or thick enough, eventually we will hit a point where almost every single one of our relationships is superficial in nature, where we have a lot of information, but we don't truly know, or we are not truly known. And when we find ourselves in a place where we have superficial relationships, it will be a very lonely and a very challenging existence that you and I will have. But there's a flip side to the coin. When we have vulnerability and when we are accepted, there's something that also takes place. When somebody is actively listening, engaging, and believing in what we're saying, affirming our fears or allowing us to speak freely, it leads to greater levels of self-disclosure. The more comfortable we become, the easier it is to talk to somebody about whatever it is that we're feeling or experiencing. And eventually, we begin to hit a point where we are known and where we are understood. See, I believe that this is the way that God sees us. That there will never be a moment where you are not accepted by him. But the biggest challenge that you face is that there is not a single relationship that you can name where you have not been rejected at some point when you were vulnerable. Whether it is with a close friend, a parent, or a spouse, there have been moments where we have been vulnerable and where we have been rejected. And because of that, we can begin to believe that God will reject us at some point. We were created for connection, but so often we drift towards isolation. But I'm here to tell you that God only goes to the right. There has never, nor will there ever be a moment where he rejects you. And so I wonder this, what would your life look like if you really believed that? See, I believe that God is big enough to face your challenges, your questions, your doubts, your fears, your angers, your frustrations, that he's big enough to handle your sin and your brokenness and your isolation. And that the way that he looks at you is only through a lens of acceptance and love. For God so loved the world, he gave. But God demonstrated his love for us in this: while you and I were still sinning, Christ died for us. And so as you spend some time in your group tonight, I wonder, what would that look like if you really believed that you could be 100% vulnerable with God and he would always